Europe has been easing restrictions on AI under pressure from Washington.
The future of the economy is this technology, and we're fudging it.
I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. Also today, a young lawyer in Pakistan takes on what's known as a period tax on menstrual products. She's suing the government.
I thought people are going to troll me or make fun of this case, but I will say the response has been shocking.
Plus, a thrift store in Canada turned up some extremely vintage items.
My earliest estimate is probably the 4th or 5th centuries CE, and then, up into the medieval period.
And in Ghana, the last month of the year is one big party. Welcome to Detty December.
If you wake up and you remember everything the next day, it wasn't dirty enough.
Today on The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. Thank you for making it here this Wednesday. To say that relations between the U.S. and Europe are strained is an understatement. The strain has been even more pronounced since the Trump administration released its new national security strategy this month.
The document skewers the European Union and warns that European culture is in danger of, quote, civilizational erasure because of policies that have allowed non-European migrants to settle there. Most European leaders dismissed the critique.
One criticism, though, has struck a chord. That's the claim that too much regulation is holding back the EU's economy. The World's Europe correspondent Orla Barry gets us started today with that story.
Taking shots at the EU for over-regulation isn't exactly new. Some in Britain have been doing it for years.
You've got thousands and thousands of bureaucrats, civil servants and administrators, and their job is to push paper.
That's Mark Littlewood, a Conservative commentator, telling Brits back in 2016 why they should vote to leave the bloc. In the past few weeks, though, most of the harsh words have been coming from across the pond.
They're not doing a good job, Europe. Is not doing a good job in many ways. They're not doing a good job.
President Trump's remarks followed those of Jamie Dimon, head of US bank JP Morgan Chase.
They've gone from 90% of the GDP of America to 65%. That's not because America did anything bad to them. It's their own bureaucracy, their own costs. They've driven business out, they've driven investment out, they've driven innovation out.
EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, gave a cool response to the wave of attacks coming from across the Atlantic.
We are still allies with America. We don't always see eye to eye on everything, but it's our internal matters we can handle ourselves.
But some in Europe believe the Americans might be onto something.
I think on the regulatory side, I think there is clearly a point.
Jakob Kierkegaard is a senior fellow with Bruegel, an economics think tank in Brussels.
I think this is a point that actually does have widespread support, not just throughout the US government, but certainly in US businesses, and importantly, from wide shares of the political spectrum and businesses in Europe.
Kierkegaard says there are plenty of lawmakers sitting in the EU Parliament, particularly on the far right, who also believe the bloc needs to dial back its regulations. But it's actually already happening.
With this agreement, we are cutting red tapes. It will mean clearer rules for our companies instead of paperwork.
This month, Morten Bodkov, Denmark's Minister for Industry and Finance, announced a new EU deal that would ease environmental reporting requirements for businesses. The EU calls it simplification. Critics say that's just a fancy word for deregulation.
And a lot of that is because of lobbying by European companies and their lobby groups.
Olivia Hudeman is with Corporate Europe Observatory, a watchdog that monitors lobbying groups in Brussels. He says corporate lobbying of EU lawmakers has soared in recent years. But all those regulations, he says, are there for a reason.
Whether that's environmental problems or it's chemicals that are harming our health, that's something that's in a democratic society. If the public wants solutions to that, then the government has to deliver.
Last year, the digital industry spent more than $175 million lobbying lawmakers in Brussels, according to an investigation by Hudeman's group. Still, when it comes to big tech, the EU Commission likes to appear to be acting tough.
Today, the Commission has issued a fine of €120 million to X for breaching the Digital Services Act.
The Commission said X failed to meaningfully verify who was behind its blue check accounts. Elon Musk, owner of X, posted that the EU should be abolished. Authorities in Brussels have also launched investigations into Google, Microsoft, Amazon and Meta over digital privacy breaches, antitrust issues and tax rules. Last night, the Trump administration went on the attack. In a post on social media, the Office of the US Trade Representative said if Brussels continues with these investigations, the US would have no choice but to begin using every tool at its disposal to counter these unreasonable measures. An EU spokesperson said today its rules apply equally and fairly to all companies operating in the bloc. Jakob Kierkegaard with Bruegel in Brussels says big fines against social media giants are likely to continue.
It suits the EU, the Commission, well to have these legal cases launched against these firms because it shows that they are not, after all, a stooge of the Trump administration.
But when it comes to regulating AI, the EU does appear to be stalling as US pressure continues. Last month, Brussels proposed postponing the enforcement of the most critical aspects of its Artificial Intelligence Act until late 2027. Amazon, Apple and Google welcomed the news, but some AI experts in Europe say all of this flip-flopping could be dangerous.
But I just think that's so messy. The future of the economy is this technology, and we're fudging it.
Barry Scannell with Irish law firm William Fry advises companies on using AI and staying compliant with EU laws. Most of his clients, he says, understand the need for regulation in Europe. The trouble starts when those rules are vague or end up being postponed altogether.
The AI we have now, it's the dial-up modem of AI. We're going to look back on these days and laugh nostalgically about how quaint it all was. It's what's coming online over the next 4 or 5 years that's really going to be transformative.
And the EU needs to be ready for that, he says. That means tensions between the bloc and the US will likely continue. For The World, I'm Orla Barry.
The Gaza ceasefire went into effect more than 2 months ago. Most of the fighting has stopped, though both sides blame each other for violating the truce. What's making things difficult and even dangerous right now for Palestinians in the Gaza Strip is the weather.
Video posted on Al Jazeera's website shows powerful winds tearing apart tents. Most Palestinians live in tents now. Heavy rains have unleashed floodwaters in Gaza on top of winter cold.
On Tuesday, Gaza's health ministry reported that an infant froze to death. The flooding also caused several damaged buildings to collapse in recent days.
This video, posted by Gaza's civil defense, shows rescue workers helping a Palestinian family climb out of a collapsed building. Amnesty International put out a statement today saying the deadly storms in recent days have inflicted further misery on an already traumatized population. It also called on Israel to allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza. Aid agencies say the flow of aid has been entirely inadequate.
Today in Washington, Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Qatar's Prime Minister, Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani. But so far, there's been no real progress on the next stages of President Trump's 20-point peace plan for ending the Gaza war. Rebuilding people's homes and other infrastructure destroyed by the Israeli military is going to take years.
That includes roads, agricultural areas, and energy infrastructure. Tomorrow, we'll be reporting on the modern history of Gaza's power grid. As recently as the year 2000, the discovery of huge gas reserves off the coast of Gaza promised to provide energy security to Palestinians who live there.
It's going to be cheaper than the electricity they buy from Israel. It'll be cheaper from what they get from Egypt. And it would make sense.
But 25 years later, the power grid in Gaza is more precarious than ever. That's tomorrow on The World.
There are many good reasons to wander into a thrift store. If you're lucky, of course, you can snag a great deal. You can also find unique and vintage items that no one else has. But one thrift store in Canada got a donation that is so vintage, it may be ancient. The World's Bianca Hillier has our story.
The thrifty boutique in Chilliwack, British Columbia, gets dozens of people dropping off donations every day. All of the items get sorted by the store staff before being placed out on the floor, says manager Sandy Parker.
Typical run-of-the-mill thrift store.
But last year, one donated jewelry set caught the staff's attention. It was made up of 2 medallions and 11 rings.
The rings did not look like they were in good shape. They just looked old. They weren't shiny or anything like that. They looked worn and old.
So old that an employee did some research to see if they had any kind of historical significance.
You feel like it could be special. We do have an advantage today with Google Image and all that sort of thing, but it doesn't do everything we need.
A few months of digging resulted in no real clues, so the thrifty boutique put the set up for sale for $30. Then a customer echoed their previous thinking and said, "You guys should take another look at these." So the thrift store employees sent an email to the archaeology department at nearby Simon Fraser University.
I don't normally respond to these kind of emails.
Sabrina Higgins is an associate professor of global humanities and archaeology.
We get a lot of emails where people ask us to give them a valuation on objects. This one was intriguing to me, though, because it came from a thrift store, which is not something I've ever experienced in my career.
After conducting some initial visual analyses, Higgins and her colleagues believe these items very well may be ancient. The thrift store donated them to the university for further research, and Cara Tremaine is part of the team who took a look. She's an assistant professor in the archaeology department and is an expert at identifying forgeries.
There are some really, really, really good forgers out there that know how to make things look ancient. But it didn't look to me like these were deliberately made to look old. So let's investigate.
Despite being donated together, Higgins thinks some of the items came from different time periods.
My earliest estimate is probably the 4th or 5th centuries CE, and then, up into the medieval period.
In terms of where they came from,
they're very likely from the region that once encompassed the Roman Empire. But whether or not all of them come from somewhere in the Balkans or somewhere in Northern Europe, that's unclear because a lot of this material culture was really sort of translatable across those regions.
To nail down those details and figure out how the items ended up in British Columbia, Higgins says they need to do more research and testing. And they're recruiting students to help with that by designing a new course around the items at SFU. Cara Tremaine is also leading the course and says students will learn how to tackle the ethical questions surrounding this work as well.
Why did we decide to accept this? And then how can we kind of retrace the steps of the provenance by really not knowing anything about them?
In fact, Higgins says, as archaeologists and museum professionals, her team has a duty to make sure that artifacts like these are returned to their countries of origin.
If we were able to repatriate those, that would be, I think, the best outcome that this course could have. And it would probably lead us to an entirely different course in which we would teach the students about repatriation processes and how we engage in that sort of on the ground and actively doing it.
The new course is set to start in September of 2026. For The World, I'm Bianca Hillier.
Tampons and pads can be prohibitively expensive. That is the case in many places. In Pakistan, that's especially true, and many women and girls cannot afford them. A lot of the price tag is because of taxes. One lawyer in the country is challenging those taxes. She argues the tax violates the Pakistani constitution, including the right to health and equality. Mahnur Omar has filed a lawsuit against the Pakistani government and told us why.
The Constitution of Pakistan guarantees fundamental rights, and any law that derogates those fundamental rights has to be struck off by the court or by Parliament itself. So our fundamental rights, for example, the right to health, the right to dignity, the right to life, and the right to equality, all rights given by the Constitution to all the citizens, including women and girls. Taxes such as these, it's a tax on biological function. So our argument is that the current sales tax regime, the Sales Tax Act, it goes against our fundamental rights. And another thing I want to mention here is in the Sales Tax Act, there's a sixth schedule which has a list. The list lists all items that are considered essential by the government, and those items are tax-free. You know what this list includes? Bovine semen and processed cheese. These are two essential items that are tax-free, but pads and tampons are not.
So pads and tampons are not considered essential goods, whereas a lot of others are. Why are they not exempt from this tax like many other goods are?
I would like to think that this wasn't done purposely. It was more of an omission coming from a place where mothers sort of sometimes feel stigma or shame in speaking to their children openly about menstruation and periods. So nobody there thought to include this. Number one, the women's lack of representation in parliament. Or number two, I would say the women that we do have in parliament, gender is at the back of everyone's mind in parliament.
So you believe this is an oversight that might have to do with the fact that there's kind of a taboo about talking about periods in Pakistan. Has the government come out and said anything about why there are taxes on these goods?
Actually, no. We've had 2 hearings so far. So this is in the court system. They kind of, it takes a long time because they were playing a game of ping pong with delaying the hearing as much as they can. So the government's only shown up they didn't come to the first hearing. They only came to the second hearing. But I don't think that the government has responded seriously yet. And we really hope they do soon. So the judge, in fact, in the last order he gave, strictly said, giving you a little bit of time, you have to give a response to each paragraph in our petition.
So the court is telling the government they have to show up, they have to respond to your suit. Let's put this in more context, though. How much is this tax, and how does that set the price compared to, what an average Pakistani can afford?
Yep. So essentially, this tax, whether it's locally produced or otherwise, raises the price by 40-50%. On a country where so many people live on the poverty line, many women end up using dirty pieces of cloth that they rewash again and again, which leads to infections, fertility issues. And, so it's a cycle of poor health. And the 40% tax, in fact, makes it so expensive that if you go to a rural area and a shop there might not even have pads in their stock because there's no customer base to buy them.
And I know that sometimes girls can't go to school, for example, when they're on their periods because they don't have the correct supplies to take care of it. What inspired you to take legal action on this?
So I actually only recently got my license. It's been 1 year. So when I got my license, my reason for even pursuing law in the first place was so I could do cases such as these. Period poverty is especially close to my heart. Once when I was little, my housekeeper said, we have a cabinet in my house where we keep our toiletries and pads. My mom just keeps them there. She said, can I have some? And I said, yeah, of course you can. She said, yeah, thank God, because she told me she uses a piece of cloth. And I think I had just gotten my period around that age and I was shocked. I said, I feel dirty using a pad for a prolonged period of time. I can't imagine someone using a cloth. So that really, really it broke my heart. And I said, I want no woman to have to experience going through this.
You mentioned that, you think there just wasn't a lot of conversation about periods in Parliament when they were deciding which goods were essential and should not be taxed. Is there a taboo in general around talking about periods still today?
Oh, for sure. In Ramadan or Ramzan, it's when we fast for a month. Women are exempt from fasting when they're on their periods. I, to this day, have friends and cousins and people in school who would be on their period and they would pretend to fast so nobody knows they're on their period. As a child, when I used to get my period in school, I used to hide my pad up as if it's, some sort of narcotic good and go to the bathroom and hope that nobody hears that I'm, unwrapping a pad. So it is very taboo.
I think that is a universal experience of
for sure.
Girls in school, for sure. But you think that this taboo in Pakistan, has contributed to this inequality. Do you think a legal victory in your case would change that taboo at all?
I think it's already started. The one thing I'm really proud of is the response. I thought people are going to troll me or make fun of this case. But I will say the response has been shocking. Everyone's been so supportive. Whether we win or lose, and I'm hoping, inshallah, that we win, but whether we win or lose, it has started a conversation, a massive one, across the country.
You mentioned that people are not shying away from this conversation. Is it a comfortable conversation for people in Pakistan to have in public, in mixed company?
I would say no. It's still pretty difficult where my grandma, for example, she's quite conservative. Even she sort of made a joke and she said, I saw you on TV and you were talking pretty openly. And I said, well, yeah, because we should talk about this. So I feel like the older generation is a bit, they find it to be too out there and they're not very happy with such conversations happening in public. But at the same time, you can see their acknowledgement about how important it is to talk about this.
Sounds like you're pointing to something of a generational divide there on attitudes about talking about periods.
Oh, for sure. Like I really think that. I think that my grandmother's generation, they don't even talk to like their own children about it. They don't talk to their husbands about it. So I feel like our generation's really changing these things around. I want to also mention that the United Kingdom also only scrapped this tax in 2022, right? And so did India and Nepal. Nepal scrapped this tax this year, only in 2025. I think everyone's sort of moving at the same pace when it comes to looking at how to make laws more gender inclusive and talking about these things.
Mahnur Omar is a lawyer in Islamabad who is suing the government of Pakistan over taxes on tampons and pads.
And now an update on a story of birds versus the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain.
The museum had planned an expansion into an adjacent sanctuary known as the Urdaibai.
Opponents of the expansion argue that birds at rest on their migratory routes need tranquil wetlands. Protesters rallied for the birds and against the museum. Yesterday, they won. The museum's board of trustees killed the project, citing technical difficulties and backlash from the public.
Y eso es lo que ha parado el proyecto Guggenheim Urdaibai. Los ciudadanos hemos dicho que no, y eso es lo que vamos a contar a nuestros descendientes.
Protest leader Ramon Gezurraga told a crowd gathered outside the museum in Bilbao today the people said no.
So, a victory for the birds.
Our show is getting ready to celebrate a major birthday. We've been on the air 30 years as of New Year's Day, and we want to hear from you. Head to our website, theworld.org, and tell us what the world means to you. That's theworld.org. Click on the banner you see there to send us a note.
The end of the year brings celebrations across the globe. Ghana takes it to a whole nother level for a whole month. Back-to-back parties, raves on the beach, the works. Welcome to Detty December. Detty spelled D-E-T-T-Y. Last December, Ridwan Karim Dini Osman got into the festivities on the beaches of Ghana's capital, Accra.
Blaring music fills the air here at the Laboma Beach in Accra. Food vendors line the beach walkways, selling everything from kebabs to Ghanaian street bites like kelewele and fried yam. Hundreds of party-goers gather around wooden tables, catching up over cold beers and cocktails.
There's a lot of traffic, even like past midnight there's traffic in places you wouldn't expect to have traffic, which means people are having a good time. So I think so far so good tonight.
Terence Ngulube, a model and fashion designer from Malawi, is one of thousands of international visitors in Ghana. He says he's here to experience the magic of December for himself.
I have fun every time of the year, as much as I can, because you never know when a moment might be fleeting. You never know when things might happen. So it's best to celebrate and to enjoy every waking moment of your day and your life.
Ngulube is also looking to explore the local fashion industry and collaborate with designers for his brand. Inside a nearby tavern, 25-year-old student Kate Japoma is hanging out with friends, sipping away a tough year of death and relationship troubles.
I lost a friend and my boyfriend broke up with me.
But tonight, she's leaving all that behind on the dance floor.
Yes. Go, give them. Shut up.
The DJ takes control, not just spinning tracks. He's commanding the crowd, turning music into a shared conversation. The stage lights flash in sync with the music, lighting up faces glistening with sweat from non-stop dancing.
The DJ is doing a great job. Like, I'm actually having fun. This is the fun I've had in a very long time.
So what is the energy giving? What is it giving?
It is giving Detty December.
And there it is, Detty December. That's the phrase on everyone's lips. But what does it really mean? For David, it's all about unwinding after a long year.
For me, Detty December is like, just letting off steam. You've worked the whole year and you just want to chill, you just want to go out, have fun with friends, family, whoever.
Juanita, on the other hand, sees it as an adventure.
For me, Detty December means just getting dirty. There's so many places to explore, so many places to visit, so many events to attend. So it's just basically being everywhere. That's what it means. Yeah, being everywhere.
Detty December is a month-long celebration of music, parties and festive events that draws investment into tourism, hospitality and Ghana's creative industries. It really took off as an international event 5 years ago in 2019 when Ghana declared a year of return for the African diaspora. And Detty December became a global celebration of roots, rhythm and reconnection. And 2024 introduces a new twist. This year, Afrobeat, a genre blending traditional African rhythms with jazz, funk and highlife, and Amapiano, a South African fusion of house music and jazz, are stepping into the spotlight, replacing the usual hip life and high life beats. And revelers like Roberta Mensah are already feeling it.
Just listen to the beats. How does it make you feel? The beats playing now, how does it make you feel?
I don't know, you tell me.
Amapiano gingers my soul. Yeah, it brings out the other side of me.
For many here, tonight is more than a party. It is a chance to embrace hope, start afresh and step into 2025 with a heart full of possibilities. And if you are wondering what a true Detty December feels like, Terence Ingulube from Malawi has the ultimate vibe check.
If you wake up and you remember everything the next day, it wasn't dirty enough. But if you wake up tomorrow and you say, hey, who is this? Then you know it was dirty.
For the world, I am Ridwan Karim Dini Osman, Accra, Ghana.
This week, we are bringing you an investigation from Reveal and Lighthouse Reports about a kind of surveillance software that is not well known. It collected a vast trove of data about regular people, a teacher, a driver, a softball coach. The data, though, drops off in 2015. Today, we find out what that software company, FirstWap, has been up to since then. Here's reporter Michael Montgomery.
The Lighthouse Reports team is holed up in a rented apartment in Prague. It's filled with breakfast dishes, luggage, a collection of laptops, and the sweat of anticipation. They've come to the Czech Republic to attend ISS World Europe, a premier gathering for intelligence agencies, police, and companies that build and sell surveillance systems. Outsiders, especially the media, aren't allowed in.
We're going to keep discreet about exactly where the camera is.
Emmanuel Freudenthal is an editor at Lighthouse. He's dressed up in a flashy suit that's been fitted with a hidden camera.
And basically, you can't see there's like a tiny hole, but you really can't tell where. It's a very beautiful fashion accessory. And
Emmanuel is getting direction from his colleague, editor and reporter Crofton Black. Crofton's been planning this operation for 6 months.
You've got that in your trouser pocket, just coming through with the wire.
Yeah, in my underwear.
In your underwear, okay. But let's hope it doesn't fall out in the middle of your conversation. Yeah? This is what makes a podcast into a hit instead of being like just kind of run of the mill, yeah?
To get inside the conference, Emmanuel is posing as Albert, a French business broker based in South Africa with lots of connections to governments and mining interests throughout the continent. Reporter Gabriel Geiger explains why Emmanuel is perfect for the role.
He's someone who just has a perfect poker face. You have no idea what this guy is thinking.
They crafted Albert's backstory as a test to see how far First SWAP would go to make a deal.
We intentionally designed him to be very shady. He's working for unnamed governments, private clients. His company is supposedly registered in the British Virgin Isles, like a sort of post box address. A bunch of red flags that anybody who's doing serious due diligence would pick up on.
We decided to approach First SWAP undercover for one very simple reason. We wanted to know, is there anything that these guys would balk at? Do they have any red lines?
Today, Albert is representing clients in French-speaking West Africa, where First SWAP doesn't seem to do much business. Lighthouse hopes First SWAP will see meeting Albert as an opportunity to increase sales in a new region. He's joined by a man they're calling Abdu, one of Albert's clients who's looking to acquire some surveillance tech. Albert's hidden camera is rolling as he and Abdu arrive at the conference. They ride an escalator up to the sales floor where tiny cameras and drones are on display. But the busiest vendors are focused on smartphones. Albert moves smoothly through the crowd. So far, so good.
Yeah. Hi, Günther. How's it going? Hello. Are you quite busy, I guess?
He and Abdu have set up a meeting with First SWAP's sales director, a man named Günther Rudolph.
I wanted to introduce you to Mr. Mala. Hello. Abdu Mala.
Günther Rudolph is in full sales mode. He doesn't show any sort of skepticism towards Albert, and he's just like launches right in.
Please take a seat.
Albert and Abdu move quickly to learn more about the company's software, Altimedes. First, they get a look at it when one of the executives demonstrates the tracking function by locating Rudolph's cell phone. On a laptop, they track his phone to a point on a map. This is the same software that was used to secretly track all those people, like Italian journalist Gianluigi Nuzzi. Then Rudolph explains how you could use Altimedes to crack into an encrypted WhatsApp account.
So what I can do now is, when it's sending the OTP to his phone.
So what Rudolph explains is that First SWAP software allows you to hack into WhatsApp accounts by stealing and intercepting these authentication text messages. And that allows you basically to take over someone's account.
Then I take the OTP, put it in my mobile phone, and I have his WhatsApp on my phone with everything.
Then Albert presents Rudolph with one of those red lines that Crofton had mentioned. He says there's a client, a private mining company in West Africa, that's having trouble with people protesting its operations.
So he's wondering what would be the best approach for that, to monitor those activists and check that they're not disrupting business.
Rudolph asks Albert,
He knows already who are the leaders, or he wants to find out.
Does the client already know who the leaders are, or does he want to find out?
The point is, do you know already the target and we want to monitor them to know what they are doing? Or do you have to find out who is the organizer?
Rudolph explains that Altimedes has another feature called geofencing. It can track large numbers of cell phones in a specific area, like a protest. He said they can even use it to identify the organizers. Gabe says the fact that Rudolph is even talking about sharing their surveillance system with this private mining company is shocking.
I think that's the moment where we're like, wow, they're actually playing ball with this.
Rudolph goes on to talk about why First SWAP is special. Their headquarters are in Indonesia, which places fewer restrictions on the export of sensitive technology like Altimedes. He says that gives them a competitive advantage. That basic idea, the lack of strong export restrictions, leads them to a conversation about another red line scenario, working with a client on a sanctions list. Someone like that is known as a specially designated national.
Special designated nationals, that means persons, people in Africa, and also entities in Africa, which are under sanction and export limitation.
You have to understand that sanctions are something that the United States and European countries put in place that bans you from doing business with a sanctioned entity. And that can be an individual, it can be a company, it can be a government.
Rudolph explains how First Swap could make a deal with someone who's on a sanctions list.
If you're just holding a German passport like Johnny,
He's talking about his colleague, Johnny Goebel.
or an Austrian passport like me, I am not even allowed to know about the project because otherwise I can go to prison.
The audio isn't great here, but what Rudolph is basically saying is that he could go to prison in his home country of Austria because it's illegal for him to help someone avoid sanctions. Then he explains how the company could run the deal through its office in Indonesia instead.
So that's why we then make such a deal, for example. We make it through Jakarta and signatures coming from our...
And then he goes on to say, slyly, we will never know about this project, quote unquote, and then sort of smiles. What Rudolph is talking about here is a way to circumvent sanctions.
At the end of the conference, Albert tells the executives he'll follow up to continue the conversation.
All right, thanks a lot. Okay, good feedback. Bye.
With the undercover operation behind them, the Lighthouse team is stunned by what they've learned. First, there was all that data Gabe discovered, and the people who were tracked more than a decade ago. And now this. Here's Crofton.
We spent like 6 months trying to figure out every possible permutation of what could happen from the sublime to the ridiculous. But I never anticipated that they were going to basically offer us a sanctions-busting recipe.
There was just one thing left to do. This September, Albert set up one final call with Günter Rudolph and 2 other First Swap executives, Johnny Goebel and Evgeny Karakanovsky. On the agenda, follow-up on the proposed deal from the trade fair.
Hi, Günter. How are you?
Hello. Fine, thank you.
I can see Dubai behind you.
Rudolph is in Dubai, where First Swap has offices. The conversation starts out with smiles and laughs. Albert asks about things like pricing for Altamides.
Depends on what the client chooses on the different modules, on the features. Minimum 1 million to whatever, 15, 20 million, theoretically.
Albert mentions that proposed deal he talked about at the trade fair, the client under sanctions who wanted to acquire Altamides.
So I think we can all agree we found a good way around the sanctions, but I have to admit...
And then, without missing a beat, Albert reveals his true identity.
I'm actually working for a coalition of investigative journalists. And so I was wondering, why did you agree to do a deal with a sanctioned client when you said yourself that you could go to prison for that?
Rudolph and his partners are silent, almost frozen, after hearing what Emanuel Freudenthal has just said. They're not moving, just staring into their computers, listening as Emanuel asks again about their conversation in Prague.
You agreed to the sale, and it was clearly against the law and the European sanctions regime. But you agreed. What's your comment on that?
Eventually, Rudolph responds.
We are not doing, we did not agree to deliver there, right?
He's pointing out they never actually signed a deal.
So when we make a contract with you, you will see the clauses that we are not dealing with people under sanction.
What he's saying here is that when we make a contract with you, there would be a clause that says we don't deal with people under sanctions. And then he says, Emanuel must have the wrong company altogether.
Either you really have the wrong company, you talk to the wrong company, or your sources or whatever is completely wrong. I don't know.
Okay, we're thanks for taking the time to answer the questions. So we'll be sending you an email with more questions and for the opportunity to respond. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Just about a week before we published this investigation, First WAP issued a statement. The company said there had been misunderstandings at the conference in Prague and that their executives only spoke about what was, quote, technically feasible. First WAP also told us they don't sell to corporate clients, only governments.
When you get to the end of one of these big investigations, there's always this question of, what does it all mean? And I think that for me, it kind of redefines who uses these tools. It redefines who can get targeted by them. And that image to me of them laughing about breaking sanctions is just something that really sticks with me. And I find it kind of haunting in a way.
Michael Montgomery reports for the Reveal podcast. Find his series produced with Lighthouse Reports and 12 other media outlets at theworld.org.
An update now on the civil war in Yemen. A faction known as the STC has taken yet another southern province. The STC, that's the Southern Transitional Council, a group that's backed by the United Arab Emirates. That happened yesterday in defiance of a Saudi-led effort to tamp down fighting in the south. Abdurrani Al-Iryani is a senior researcher with the Sana Center for Strategic Studies and joined the show from Amman, Jordan. He described for us the current landscape of who controls what in Yemen.
In the northwest is the Houthi movement, well known already. And in the east, a pocket in the town of Marib of the internationally recognized government. And the south and the rest of the east are under the control of the STC.
All right, so three major groups, the Houthis, the internationally recognized government, and this STC. So what should our listeners know about the Southern Transitional Council that claimed more land yesterday?
The STC started as a protest movement against the marginalization of public servants in the south after the defeat of the Southern Socialist Party in 1994. And then it turned into a proper organization in 2017 with the support of the United Arab Emirates, which gave them the funds and the weapons to turn them into a major military force. Their objective is to restore the old southern state, which unified with the north in 1990.
Some analysts have called these wins by the SDC a turning point in the war in Yemen. Others are saying this could actually cause a conflict to escalate. What's your take?
I think it's both. The likelihood of escalation is now much greater. The Saudi interest in Hadramaut in the eastern part of Yemen would not allow it to stand by while the STC seizes Hadramaut and its oil installations. And I think that there is a diplomatic way out of this, but if mismanaged, it will lead to major conflict.
I mean, notably, the UAE is also backing a militia in Sudan, the RSF, which has been reportedly responsible for atrocities against a vast number of Sudanese civilians. Why is the UAE backing these various rebel groups?
The UAE is intent on making itself useful to the United States and to its ally, Israel. And they have extended their strategic reach across the region, Sudan, Libya, Somalia. They are trying to basically fluff their feathers to become more important so they can enjoy the security umbrella extended by the US vis-a-vis Saudi and Iranian hegemony.
Meanwhile, as you know, neighboring Saudi Arabia has played a major role in the war in Yemen as well, all while there are these reports that Saudi Arabia is now trying to de-escalate the war in Yemen. To what degree do you think a rivalry is playing out in Yemen between Saudi Arabia and the UAE?
I think the recent STC advance was triggered by the face-off between the Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Sudan. Saudi Arabia threatened UAE with international sanctions in Sudan, and UAE responded in Yemen.
And the U.S. is partners with both the UAE and Saudi Arabia. How is that going to work out?
Well, the main partner of the U.S. is the Emirates. Saudi Arabia is sort of in sometimes, out sometimes in the allies list of the United States. As you know, the Emirates has established relations with Israel, and they're trying to be very useful for both Israel and the U.S., while Saudi Arabia has refused to join the Abrahamic Accords until a Palestinian state is established.
So elaborate on that. I mean, where do you see that tension going?
I think there's a diplomatic way. Clearly, the STC has achieved a major military gain that needs to be translated into a political gain for them to be able to withdraw in a face-saving way. And I think the objective of STC at this stage is to be recognized as the sole representative of the South and for the Emirates to be part of any peace negotiations in Yemen. In the past, or rather in 2022-23, Saudi Arabia engaged in negotiations with the Houthis for end of hostilities in Yemen without the participation of the Emirates, and that irked the Emiratis and irked the STC and their other allies in Yemen. So now the obvious ask by both the Emirates and the STC is for the Emirates to be fully involved in the negotiations for a peaceful settlement of the conflict in Yemen, and for the STC to be the sole representative of the South.
What parties need to be involved on the diplomacy track, and how engaged are they at the moment?
Well, I think the only country that can make a difference is the United States. The United States has an interest in fighting terrorism, and I think the conflict will create ungoverned spaces for Al-Qaeda and ISIS to occupy and cause trouble for everyone, mostly for the Yemeni people, but also for the interests of the United States and the West.
Abdurrani Al-Iryani, senior researcher with the Sana Center for Strategic Studies. He was speaking with us from Amman, the Jordanian capital.
A figure skating shakeup north of the border. Skate Canada, the governing body for the sport across Canada, says it will no longer hold any major events in Alberta because of a new transgender sports law in the province.
Back in September, Alberta passed legislation banning trans athletes from competing in amateur women's sports. On Tuesday, in response to that ban, Skate Canada put out a statement that said, "We are unable to host events in the province while maintaining our national standards for safe and inclusive sport."
I am a queer woman. I couldn't be more proud, and I couldn't be more supportive of their choice.
That's Canadian ice dancer Caitlin Weaver speaking with the CBC.
Skate Canada has been working for years to shorten and make the gap smaller between these groups of people that don't feel welcome.
Not everyone's supporting Skate Canada's decision to withdraw from major events in Alberta. The province's Conservative Premier Danielle Smith called it disgraceful. "We expect they will apologize and adjust their policies," Smith wrote on X.
The new law that prompted the decision is called the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act. It says that only athletes assigned female at birth can participate in women's sports. A number of international sports organizations have passed similar rules, including the U.S. Olympic Committee.
The World is produced by GBH and PRX, broadcasting weekdays from the Nan and Bill Harris studio in Boston and from the Department of Communication at UC San Diego. Find us online anytime at theworld.org and find our original reporting on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to our new channel there. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. Join us right back here tomorrow.
The World is supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. macfound.org. By the Lumina Foundation, committed to a fair, universal system for learning beyond high school that offers every American the chance for a better life. luminafoundation.org. And by FJC, a foundation of philanthropic funds serving the nonprofit sector with donor-advised funds, fiscal sponsorship, bridge lending, and more. FJC.org. The World's theme music is composed by Ned Porter. The World is a co-production of GBH Boston and PRX. More information at theworld.org.